so welcome back everyone. I hope you enjoyed your nap. Lunch. The Most Reverend Bishop Richard Umbers hails from Auckland, New Zealand, and is the youngest of 5 children, at least they used to be. He holds a Bachelor of Economics from the University of Sydney and a Master of Management from the University of some Maori name, Waikato, is it? Yeah, there we go. He entered the Opus Dei Seminary of Alla Bianca in Rome in 1996 and there obtained a Bachelor of Theology from Santa Croce Pontifical University and went on to a doctorate in philosophy from the University of Navarra in Spain. Bishop Umbers was ordained a priest on the 1st of September 2002. On the 25th of June 2016, he was appointed by Pope Francis Auxiliary Bishop of Sydney and was consecrated to the episcopate on the 24th of August 2016. I was there. He's worked as a school and university chaplain as well as a tutor and lecturer in philosophy. Bishop is widely published in the area of philosophy, regularly addresses youth gatherings, has a strong interest in social media. Our younger members are quite big fans of his, actually, all around the world. And he has a library of his own podcasts. He's also proficient in Spanish, Italian, and Latin, as we saw just a moment ago when he enjoyed the humorous translation of a prayer for the blessing of hand sanitizer. Yes. Bishop Umbers also holds a certificate in memology, which is the study of memes. They were invented by the eminent Dr. Richard Dawkins, whose other life work has been completely debunked. Please join me in welcoming Bishop Richard Umbers.
Thank you. So I'll be concise, I would imagine, given that I've got the flu. So I'll see how I'll be a bit more subdued. When it comes to tradition, we're looking at tradition and continuity. And with the forthcoming canonization of Cardinal Newman, I think it's always a good way to look at what is truly a development of doctrine as opposed to mixing all the various terms of hermeneutical rupture. Of course, on Twitter. How many of you are on Twitter? 1 and 2. Thank you. Only 2 of you on Twitter? Okay.
I'm on Facebook.
Now, Twitter is the preserve of college students, journalists, and politicians. So there's various personalities on Twitter with regards to these sorts of topics, but tradition, as Pope Francis refers to that tradition, and it's always interesting to see the kind of image that is portrayed of Pope Francis in the media, and the Pope Francis who is actually Pope Francis, who I was able to meet with a few weeks ago. The bishops of Australia spent 2.5 hours with the Holy Father, and I was pumped after that. But I have to say that the Holy Father was very straight down the line with regards to doctrine. And when we spoke about things, yes, of course, we could mention from Scripture or from documents, the documents of Vatican II, which is always interesting to bring to mind, especially in these heady times of the Plenary Council, which is coming forward. Someone gave to me, I'm rambling here, but someone gave to me a copy of the Dutch Catechism. Has anyone ever read? Have any of you read the Dutch Catechism? I'm loving it. No. I love these things. It's because it could have been the Plenary Council. You read through it. It's awesome. I'm the kind of person who, for Good Friday, instead of watching the Mel Gibson, which I've seen a number of times, I'll watch Jesus Christ Superstar.
Yeah.
And count the Christological heresies. That's the kind of stuff I enjoy doing. You hate reading something. I'm not hating. I love reading the Dutch Catechism to see the existentialism and how of its time it is. What was so super duper relevant and trendy. But even now, you see how dated that 1960s existentialism is. And it's one of the points that Pope Benedict makes when he speaks on the 100 anniversary of the Pontifical Biblical Commission. With all the difficulties that go in with the decisions made in 1907 and all the rest of it, but the way he deals with that, and he says, as Catholics, we have this great advantage of being, in a sense, presented with another way of looking at things, such that we're not caught up in the hermeneutical frameworks of a particular period. Because any kind of biblical exegesis of the last 200 years has always been influenced by Hegel, in a way that perhaps those exegetes weren't aware. It was just the environment they bred. And you look at what is said in the 1960s, and the movies, and there's a great book called Keeping Your Balance in the Modern Church, if you come across that classic. It's an Aussie classic from written at that time. I used to read it. It's worth having a look at, but he has a go at the kind of church speak that came out at that time, and movies such as Cool Hand Luke with Newman and others. Anyway, but it shows you this kind of tragic despair, that you form a little group of people, it's about us and vague spiritual leanings, and that's it. And ultimately, it doesn't, what is it going to lead to? And I think that's the kind of pronouncement that we tend to come in our own days when we get together and relive the existentialism of the 60s. It's quite amusing also to see how relevant it's not. Because I'm going to talk about Generation Z. The kind of nostalgia and the emotions tied up with a particular time frame, of which people have lived and experienced, and now trying to recreate in some way, which is an impossible challenge. People say that, you're trying to recreate the 1950s. In a sense, you're trying to recreate the 1970s. If you look at the popularity of something like Stranger Things, which is trying to recreate the 1980s, I'm sorry, that's my time. I love the 1980s. That's when I was a teenager. And you get to the nostalgia. That's when music was really music. I'm into it. But in a sense, how doomed that kind of a project is, based on nostalgia. And in some ways, when you look at certainly what's being put forward in terms of the plenary council, it really is kind of like doomed nostalgia. Anyhow, but tradition is the guarantee of the future, not the keeper of ashes. That's what Pope Francis was saying. And the tradition of the church is always in motion. Tradition is not a museum. Tradition does not preserve ashes. Tradition is the roots that guarantee the tree grows, flowers, and gives fruit. And that's true. We can't recreate the 60s and 70s and just give it a kind of a 2020 paint over. Just change a couple of words from the Dutch Catechism and hope that now we're relevant. It doesn't work like that. So one of the points that you have often seen made with reference to the spirit of Vatican II, and I'm talking here from my own study of the 90s, but was one that it's not that we shouldn't be looking to the signs of the times, it's just that we need to be accurately looking to the signs of the times, and you can take issue with whether people are truly doing that. And given that I now inhabit a bureaucratic sphere over these last few years, I can assure you that, no, we don't actually read the signs of the times, like in the bureaucracy anyway, or it depends which signs or which times, I suppose. When it comes to youth work, that's often a discovery that I've made, and advertising that is put forward for many youth festivals and other such things. I often wonder, but why do you keep doing this particular genre? There's a wide variety amongst what young people actually want to see. Why this particular vein? And I realise it's more to do with it being targeted to the decision makers, who are people who are my age or older, and what we think youth want to see. So it's rational. It's about producing material that would appeal to someone of my age, thinking what would be of appeal to someone who's young. A bit complicated, but I think that's how I try and rationalise why you see the brochures you do. John the 23rd threw open the windows to all of this. He says the church needs to be a cultivator of the garden of life. So, there's a wonderful book that you may or may not have read called The Glass Bead Game by Hess. Have any of you come across that particular book? I'd highly recommend it. It's a book in which there is almost no action. I think the most action that you'll find in it is he goes for a bushwalk. But it's an excuse to talk, and there's a lot of talk. But it's about this near future in which there is a secular order of intelligentsia, and they groom them from a young age, and they join this. It's like they live like monks, but even though they're all secular. And it's almost like a cryptic crossword puzzle, because it involves lots of erudition, and then brought forward to bring an alignment of different glass balls and all the rest. But what's of importance to the book is their encounter with the Benedictine order. So they actually meet some people who are religious, and they bring with them a sense of history, a sense of time. And I suppose it's, when you look at a very long-established religious order, Dominicans, like maybe newbies in comparison to the Benedictines, but that serenity that is brought about, we're seeing, things like this have happened before, and there are cycles, and you're kind of more aware of what's going on. Not to be so detached that you never dip your toe in the water, but it is interesting to see what changes and what stays the same. All this flux and sort of, even Heraclitus in the end does believe that there is some sort of stability. At least it's the same, never step into the same river twice, but what is a river? We won't even go into those things. Doctrine exists, says Cardinal Newman, in the play of lively minds. To live is to change, to be perfect is to have changed often. For some things to remain the same, things do need to change. What's meant by that? Well, we develop. To be true to that kind of development, obviously the analogy you could make is to a human body, for instance. Where's our youngest member? Is it Colby? Corby? Like Corby. You would expect in 30 years' time Corby to look different.
Why?
Corby, in 30 years' time we should look a little different. We would hope, yes. So for Corby to remain Corby, he does need to change. There's growth. If you put your face hat on, you look at yourself in 30 years' time, and I actually quite liked it, the one I saw of myself. I'm not looking forward to it. This is a jolly old man, Anyway, I hope I keep the smile. But so to remain yourself, there does need to be a certain change in the life of a religious order. 800 years, well, yeah, you can see there are developments. And in that development, you see what is truly meant to be Dominican. And the essential features of, someone who preaches, but has that way of doing mental prayer, whatever that looks like. Anyway, there's different features to the Dominican charism, which over 800 years shine all the more clearly. Even if it's not about handing someone a whip or something like that. I think that's part of the character. So we come to our own time. How do we, in all of this grand scheme and the revival of the 70s, and, this morning I was even listening to Staying Alive. Luigi's getting himself revved up in the morning. Yeah, so it's still, still pretty cool. How do you reach Generation Z? Now you've heard the term boomer. What does it be? A boomer, someone born after World War II. They often speak disrespectfully of the boomers, the boomer generation. Blame the boomers, and then they blame Generation Y and millennials. So it's the boomers versus the millennials. And I'm from Generation X, which we're the forgotten ones, and we're just sad and sorry about everyone's all the rest. But Generation Z, so millennials are born between 1981 and 1995. And these, look, whoever comes up with these sorts of, it's like saying a teenager. They're all marketing concepts in some ways. But anyone born after 1996, basically, is Gen Z. And there's a generation gap between millennials and Gen Z. You think, all young people. Well, no. Raise your hands if you understand the following sentence. I took this from the Urban Dictionary. I can't stand those Zoomers. All they do is use their phones all day to play Fortnite and watch TikTok videos. 3 people have understood. So, so who here reads Reddit?
No,
Does
I've got a
anyone read
job.
Reddit? No one's on Reddit? Okay. Which is more popular, Minecraft or Fortnite?
Fortnite.
Minecraft.
Really?
Yeah. So they're taking Fortnite.
The graphics are crap.
So they're
It's a
taking it back.
return to the 80s.
If you were reading Reddit, you'd know these things. Okay.
I've got a job.
Who has heard the song Hit or Miss? I guess you never miss, huh? You got a boyfriend, I guess he never kissed ya. No, none of you. Wow, you do not watch TikTok videos. You have not been watching TikTok videos.
I also don't know what TikTok is.
It's like the new Vine. It's the teenagers.
Oh, I thought it was that
teenagers
Chinese
with
thing.
way too much time on their hands.
Yeah.
These are perfectly for them. And then so you've got all these what we call cosplay.
Oh yeah.
People dressed up hit or miss. I guess. Anyway, look, it's just it's awful. It's awful. Okay, I'm saying it's awful. But
Did you drink
it's
Belle Delphine's bathwater?
Yeah, well, that's the kind of thing that sort of comes from, and then all the associated. Yeah, it's awful.
I thought
Anyway,
it was some
I'm
Chinese
just
thing.
describing states of the, I don't know, purgatory or hell. I'm not quite sure. Anyway, people put themselves into it.
Debauched.
Who knows PewDiePie? Have any of you watched
I've
PewDiePie?
heard PewDiePie, but
I've heard of it.
So he's got almost 100 million subscribers on YouTube. He's the most popular YouTuber. The Swedish guy in his late 20s. And he just does these random 10-minute videos. But he obviously discusses memes and pop culture and that kind of thing. So he's a very, very popular guy. But again, you're not the target audience. There's no reason why you should know it yourself. But if you think frivolous teenager, not much time, on the phone, just going, have you seen kids dance? Have you seen the dances? Have you been there and kids are sort of, I can't do it myself, but you know, they're going like this and they're going like that.
Yeah.
So that's all from Fortnite. Here we go. Oh, this man can. Here we go. Look at this. There we go. You've got to practice though. It's not as easy as it looks. It's actually,
I did a very bad job, but I did a better job than you.
I'm just worried that when I go to Perth for ACYF, you know, on the stage, now all the bishops do the floss.
good lord.
They'll do it in 10 years when they've
Please
already
don't.
forgotten it.
Please don't be relevant.
Bingo, that's it.
Yeah.
Okay. But I can just imagine. Oh, no, they're just getting asked.
I'm going to edit that out of the video, by the way.
You're already doing things which are already passé.
Oh yeah, that's true. In business at all.
But this is Gen Z. So at least that's their cultural surround. And so if you want to understand where they're coming from or how they think, these are some pop culture references. What does it mean? It means you're less focused, if that's possible. But you can multitask. You know, there's always 5 screens, 6 screens going on all at the same time. It's very common to watch something on Netflix, but to be on your phone at the same time. It's very common. So you don't watch a movie, you don't look at it. You're doing something else when you're watching a movie. There's usually about 2 or 3 conversations going on in a lecture theatre. I might be talking to you now, but if you were in Gen Z, you'd be on your phones, all of you, and you'd be making a comment on this and doing something else, and then coming back into this, and then
We have that problem in our chapter meetings.
yeah, this is what goes on.
Ban the
So high-paced technology is the norm. Anyone who's not into high-paced technology, there's just no patience. So we're dinosaurs. You know, sort of, the things we talk about, way we work, and then it's kind of like, it's turned into oil already. Very big on being individualistic. And very likely, I mean, because they've grown up with the thing, they're just addicted to the iPhone or the tablet. So there's real angst being separated from your phone. Like real angst, like there's, they go into sort of shock. Well, if you look at the younger generation, if you include millennials and Gen Z, that's 40% of the work population. What are they concerned about? Yeah, climate change, protect the environment, it's kind of like a number one message. So, pansexuality is very important. Whatever with whatever. Anything other than that is homophobic, transphobic, panphobic, I don't know if you can see that, but it is, but in that sense it is, you know, it's whatever with whatever. Have you seen the latest in the Marvel movies, the female Thor with the bisexual Valkyrie and whatever. No, I mean, it's just that's what it's about. Very pessimistic outlook on leadership. So obviously one of the things with social media is that whatever goes on anywhere in the world can be uploaded, shared, and you know, there's a general distrust in institutions. Well, that's simply accelerated as a result, because you do something wrong or whatever, it might affect the local population these days. You do something wrong, it goes viral. It's just one of those things. So they're not going to trust political or religious leaders. They do not see them as reliable and accurate source of information. Much more likely to trust people who run NGOs. People who are not for profit, they're more likely to be trusted. So if you look at religious or political leaders, the trust level is about 10%. If you look at the people who work for not-for-profits, trust level is about 25%. In terms of the surveys done. Both Gen Y and Gen Z say they would be anxious if they could not check social media in one day. Almost half of them would actually start to feel anxiety. So that's an interesting point as to who you're reaching out to. Even though they would recognise that it has a negative impact on them. In the same way, like, you know, we have addiction, so I don't think anyone would say that the 6 o'clock swill was a good idea. But that's what people used to do back in the olden days, you know, go get drunk as skunks before they went home. Or gambling, or other forms of activity that impacts upon your normal and what you would consider a healthy way of being. Well, technology is one of those addictions. It has especially, someone said, I don't know, is this true with Instagram, that they won't show you how many likes something gets? Is that true?
It is a regional experiment.
Okay.
So they launched it, I read about it in the film. They launched it earlier, I think a couple of weeks ago in Canada, where you can see the likes, other people pressing the heart button on your stuff. You can see your own, but you can no longer see how many people have pressed the heart button on other people's things.
In Australia as well, man.
And what they've done is they liked what they saw, so they've expanded it to several other regions, including Australia. And the idea is to address the huge mental health implications, the negative impacts that Instagram specifically has had on people, competing with other people in how popular they are. So they put up a picture and, oh, this one's only got 10,000 people hitting the heart button on it, whereas that other girl that I've never met and never will has 11,000. And so my life is ruined, I'm worthless. They've made it so that you can only see your own.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll see what but that's it. I'm on Instagram, I don't really use it that much. I don't have a natural affinity for it. When I visit an art gallery, it's kind of more or less when I put something on Instagram. But that's where the majority of millennials are. Look, my love is Twitter. I am on Facebook. I do things on Facebook. I recognise it's a mainstream place to be, but you know, I'm addicted to Twitter. In a certain sense. So, but that's a very special kind of place. Again, what do you do? But so, how do we reach out then to the younger generation? and I speak more from experience with a number of school and university aged men and women, children, as a chaplain of a school and a chaplain of a university college. And that's probably why I get into doing memes and meme culture. It's quite fun. I've always been in that environment. And some are classic aspects to youth of any age, and that is to challenge them. People want challenge when they're younger. When we're older, we want comfort. When we're younger, we want risk. We want the truth. That's what we tell ourselves. When we're older, we think, hang on, what does this mean? What are the consequences? You know, we've been burnt by life experience and understood that, you know, it actually costs effort to make money. And, you know, just because they said they would do this didn't mean that they would, and all the rest. And, you know, so you tend to be a little bit more guarded when you're older. But what that means then is that when you're reaching the younger people, you need to be talking about the truth, whatever that is. Not to be bland in what you're saying. Anything in a bureaucracy, you work very, very hard to make things sound as unappealing as possible. Because the focus is not upon output, the focus is upon not getting blamed. So you try to be the smallest possible target, you know, to offend as few people as possible, sort of thing. Well, that obviously is of little interest to youth. And I guess that's a question then of being authentically bold. People are into niche stuff when they're young. They're exploring. And there's nothing wrong with looking to a tradition, such as your own Dominican tradition, in its fullness. That's fine. What is seen from people who lived in the 60s and 70s as not mainstream, you know, there's not the same kind of hang-up about it for people who are of this generation. Yeah, like in a certain sense, everything is weird. So you might think, you know, oh, what is mainstream Catholicism? Look, we're all fringe dwellers now. Like anyone Catholic is a fringe dweller. And poorly understood. And as a result, you know, ignorance is always the worst enemy. So anyone who stands up and says something very mainstream as a Catholic is going to be seen as some kind of weirdo. And it's just, you know, so what do you have, you know, and again, it's not to make an excuse that we should all therefore be weirdos. So we've got to try the apostolate of normality, you know, insofar as we can, insofar as we can. But not to be held back, you know, the fact of just living your whatever your spirituality, your tradition is.
I think you get that in people like Bishop Barron.
Yeah.
He comes across as an entirely normal, reasonable type kind of person, but he's out there on social media, he's out there, he's got his Word of Fire videos. He comes across as like anyone with a brain could kind of watch it and see the impressed.
I think that's the thing, is that you know, we've got to try to be reasonable in how we put things forward, but not to water down who we are or the way we look. And people are looking to us to provide what is specifically Catholic, or specifically Dominican. The other stuff, they can get it from elsewhere, and in better quality, frankly. You know, it's never going to be our advantage that we're like Renaissance artists who do the most beautiful things. That's going to take a while to get back to that. But we can give you what is specifically Catholic, and that's what we have to put forward to people. So it's in a world that's so relativistic, and very emotive, and you know, we have to change the way that we say things, be sensitive to that, and I think we are, but not to water down the demands that are there, especially with young people. You want to go, no, this is what you know, it's what it's about. There's a beauty, there's a real beauty in authenticity. I think anyone who has faith moves the people around them, even though they might have many flaws. But if their faith is genuine, you know, you get paid out, you get laughed at, but people, it's like, actually, I wish I had the valor that person displays in season and out of season. And that's the person I'm going to talk to when I want to know something. You know, when I have this kind of conversion. Having said that, there's a kind of acceptance that catechism, so old-fashioned. We've got to be relevant and talk to your experience, that kind of thing. And yet, there's need for catechetical knowledge. Youth would have next to no knowledge of any of the basics. Now, those who are of an older generation remember rote learning, but there's need for rote learning at a young age. And we now have generations of people without any kind of systematic understanding of the faith, even people who are really into their faith. Young people who read, you know, I don't know, UCAT, and I don't know if they read UCAT, but who look at Robert Barron or do these things. But there's going to be, at times, some significant gaps, even amongst people who are really into their faith. They just haven't had that systematic overview, which is what catechism gives you. And we all have questions, and the catechism is a brilliant resource for when you're thinking through why is this and how come the other. Yeah.
One of the most effective tools I've found as someone who went to school in the 90s and never bothered not even learning my times tables, which is rough in finance when you're supposed to do maths in your head and you can't.
Yeah.
World Youth Day 2008, we handed out the compendium of the catechism, and then we had millions of those printed. There are still places tucked around the archdiocese parishes and chaplaincies that have boxes of them, and I still meet people in the street who don't know anything about the faith and want to learn, and I hand them a copy of that.
Yeah.
And it's what UCAT wanted to be and failed, but I think the compendium was a success.
I think they need to republish it en masse, the compendium.
Yeah, well, I mean...
that should be a plenary council outcomes for catechesis, is print that bloody compendium.
Compendium, sure.
And
well,
the
ones
things that makes
make
it most useful.
It's so concise.
Yeah.
It's so concise, and it's an authentic presentation of the tradition of the church.
And it does it in a comprehensive manner. It was quite ingenious that it includes beautiful sacred art and a very brief explanation on the following page. And so each section is headed with the artistic patrimony of the church. And some people immediately criticized it and said, oh, it doesn't speak to the global experience, the indigenous people won't get it. Well, they know what beautiful things look like too. But whenever I'd hand that to people, usually non-native English speakers from China or something, they'd look at this and go, you're giving this to me for free. And I said, yes, I want you to read this. And they love it, and they've kept in touch.
Yeah, well, the thing is, it appeals to, what is normal anyway, but it appeals to a normal person, because we do have questions, and we do want solid answers. And it's solid.
And it's not that thick.
It's solid. If you read the Dutch Catechism, it's not solid. Oh, look, I thoroughly enjoy reading, but for all the wrong reasons. It's one of the,
it's like eating Cocoa Pops for breakfast.
Does anybody read Ratzinger's Catechism?
Sorry?
Does anybody read Ratzinger's Catechism?
Which, the
one that put out on Pope Paul, John Paul II.
Oh, sorry, yes, that one. Oh, yeah, well, I've read that 3 times. I especially love the 1992 Catechism. Oh, that's masterpiece.
But it's heavy, isn't it?
Well, yeah, but actually, when you make your way through it, if you just do 15 minutes a day or something like that, it's so well.
It's a good reference point too. I mean, you don't kind of.
I had a young man, when I was a university chaplain in college, I had a young man come to me and said, Father, I want to become a Catholic. He was a country Aussie boy. I went, okay, well, very good, that's great. Because he met other young Catholics who were actually practicing their faith, a very rare thing. And I said, well, maybe you could have some lessons in that going. He said, well, look, it's a bit dry, a bit hard, but this is this thing called the Catechism, and it might be, well, I think you might be up to it to read it. He said, fun, I read it. What? Oh yeah, no, I've been through all of that. I read that. He'd already done he'd read it. There's other fellows I've come across on Twitter. One fellow I know who became a Catholic, and he read the entire Summa. And I had to encourage him to put it down and pick up the Catechism. He goes, oh, can I just do the Summa? I said, no, you also need to read the Catechism. So, okay. And I said, yeah, I mean, people are up to it. Now, that's a specific
Yeah.
group of people.
Did you baptize that bloke on the spot?
But there's, you know, I mean, there's different, we know there are different paths for people, but it is also a path, there's knowledge and truth. And it shouldn't be neglected. And unfortunately, we speak a lot about how, you know, the good, but we shouldn't neglect the true. And when it comes to talking about who God is, Bishop Barron says one of the conditions for the emergence of aggressive atheism in these last 2 centuries has been the ineptitude of Christians at articulating what they mean by the word God. And unfortunately, if you ask most people to give an account of the hope that is within them, it's blurry at best. When I was a personal anecdote here, but you know, when I got confirmed at the age of 19. It was a week after I joined Overstay, actually. It was already late. Because we had the opportunity when we were 16, we used to do that, and I wasn't convinced by the arguments. I went to all the classes, I asked all the people, and they couldn't give me answers. None of it was satisfactory. Because I said, well, what makes Catholicism true? Why should I, why be Catholic? Like, I believe you should sow where the seed was planted. And I go, what on earth does that mean? It's really arbitrary.
What is the sound of one hand clapping?
Yeah, no, but I mean, the thing is, like, sow where the seed was, what are you saying? Like, I had genuine questions, and I mean, to be fair, the people who were against the faith couldn't tell me anything either. So I was in limbo, in a certain sense, because no one could give an articulate response. It was only when I went to university I suddenly encountered philosophy and thought. There's a real need, and especially with young people. So the document on the Synod for Young People, which is a very long document, but I'll read a quote from it. Listening is an encounter in freedom which requires humility, patience, readiness to understand, and a commitment to formulate the answers in a new way. Listening transforms the hearts of those who do it, especially when it takes place with an interior disposition of harmony and docility to the Spirit. So it's not just a gathering of information, nor is it a strategy for achieving a goal, but it's the manner in which God himself relates to his people. God sees the wretchedness of his people, and he hears their cry. He's deeply moved, and he comes down to deliver them. The church, through listening, enters into the movement of God, who in his Son comes close to every human being. So, if we're truly listening, and we are aware of the signs of the times, we're not imposing our own hermeneutic category of the 1970s on people who are in a different place. And it's a personal relationship, so we are sharing our story. I mean, it's good to share and listen to all these dialogue, and if we're truly doing so, on the basis of our own formation of catechesis and prayer and solid piety. And then we are sharing with them, coming from within, what we truly believe, and that's seen. And it's in the context of which we've also listened to where they're coming from and what we're the classic sort of new evangelization things. Don't answer questions that people aren't asking. Yeah, to a point. You want to give people novel things too as well. But if you can present to people, having listened and understood what their own concerns are, whether it be a stubbed toe or, broader issues to do with the environment. We could learn from the Jesuits. Here we go, this is for Dominic speaking. Learn from the Jesuits about going in through their door so that they come out through ours. It's very Jesuit spirituality. I think, but there's a lot. There is a lot in it. Because as soon as you start to truly engage and people feel understood and listen to, and then they're more receptive to open it. Let's Let's find how Jesus Christ answers our issues. The Jesus of the Gospels, like the real Jesus, not the who was that fellow from the turn of the century from 1900s?
The historical Jesus.
Yeah. Who was that guy? His name always escapes me. I'm senior moments all the time.
I don't think anyone cares anymore.
No. But what's his name? The guy who was the great doctor and all the rest of it. He did his PhD on the life of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
All the people who wrote different lives of Jesus. What was his name?
Schweitzer?
Schweitzer. Yeah, Schweitzer. So, I mean, it's a classic issue of, well, who's Jesus today is a greenie, who's into non-judgmental, whatever, sexual orientation.
And sexual.
Yeah, whereas the Jesus of 200 years ago was an enlightenment figure who, for social reform in terms of politics. I mean, you create your own Jesus, and that's what Schweitzer was able to show, when you're disassociated from the historical Jesus who we know ourselves through the tradition of the church, through the scriptures. And to be able to present Jesus of the Gospels. So, part of the listening, though, too, is understanding that our interlocutor lives in a culture in which religion is opposed to science. Let's take it as a given. So it's always, when you present, I love presenting religious who are scientists. We did a scholarship in the cathedral talk a couple of years ago where I got some nuns and some priests who, in their own right, had secular PhDs in science. And they had to defend science against people who were fideists, who were lay people who were fideists. I enjoyed that a lot. But it really freaks people out to know that a religious figure is totally in tune with today's science. They feel that religion cannot actually stand up to rational scrutiny, because a lot of what they are presented with is fideistic nonsense. So any kind of intellectual rigor as applied to the way we think about our faith is just a no-no. How dare you? It's choose your own spirituality. How can I think rationally about these things? So that I do enjoy. Sometimes I won't go into them here, but there are some very pointed jokes. I'll share them with some others later because it might be triggering. But they do show the need for a more rigorous treatment of the faith.
Is this what we're seeing, the rise in sort of a new agey sort of stuff, so I can have my spirituality without institutional commitments? But it's spiritual in that it's transcendent.
Well, even within
but
the
it's illogical.
institution, there's no role or room for dogma.
Yeah.
So
yes.
it's, again, this is the plenary council law. If it was to go off track.
Yeah.
So the Holy Father, when we spoke to him about the plenary council, he was very clear about what it means to be on track. And that means being in communion with the universal church.
Yes.
Scripture and tradition and all the rest of it is taken for granted. When the Holy Father speaks about the sense of the faith, it's Lumen Gentium number 12. It's what we've seen in the documents.
Yes.
It's not some sort of sociological. Or what do you guys reckon?
Well, I think we've actually turned to, and I was reading an article the other day, we've turned to a kind of a naturalism in some sense too. I think within the church there's a sort of do we really believe in things like grace and
Yeah,
all that sort of
well,
stuff?
yeah, I mean, we'll talk about the terms.
Yeah.
But what do you mean by that when,
Yeah.
when you unpack that?
Yeah.
Many times I would say there's a Lutheran understanding of communion, of grace.
Yeah.
In many ways, I think there's a it wouldn't be too far off. And that's due to a lack of formation.
Even the Eucharist, the big devotion to the Blessed Sacrament. I mean,
We many times
Is he
we
really
are
there?
Protestants who pray the Rosary.
yeah, that's right.
So and again, because you see that in the liturgy wars,
Yeah.
lex orandi, lex credendi. When people get upset about certain aspects of Catholic piety, it is because they have a different theology.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not a Catholic theology,
Yeah.
which is why they're certain. It's against their
Friction.
sensibilities. Yeah, there's a friction. So. The Bible is something outdated, it's unreliable, and many of this is much of this is in the popular culture. You see the way that things are dealt with in memes. Religious belief gives rise to violence. God is a threat to my freedom. I mean, that's a more classic. You know, even like Sartre, even if God did exist, I'd still have to deny him. You know, fine to be free. So that's the environment in which, you know, given what it is to be in the West, that everyone is raised in. And even if it's not dealt with in a Catholic school, that's broader society. That's what most kids would accept. So that's what you're dealing with when you're engaging in these areas. And that means that, well, we need to be intelligent, respectful, culturally sensitive, certainly, but rigorous in how we present the faith. And showing the way that John Paul II would talk about dealing with what is empirical, but the need to transcend the empirical, or to deal with ways of rationality or wisdom that are not necessarily scientific and yet are important. I mean, the classic one is to diss philosophy in the name of science, but as soon as you start talking about science per se, you're in the realm of philosophy. That's a classic sort of rhetorical move that you can use. But it's an important one to get that across, to get people to think on that. So it's how we present doctrine, but it does need to be presented. It does need to be challenged. And I think Thomas Aquinas is a great person to turn to in the way in which he approaches matters. And he's so open and so across all the different streams of thought in the culture of his time, and yet very systematic. You know, his work emerges out of those debates that people had. And yet there's this real synthesis of faith and reason. You know, so truly both. It's a beautiful ideal to always be working towards, I think, in what we have to do. Look, I'll leave it there, and I'll open up to questions.
Just a comment there.
Sure.
Having mentioned Thomas Aquinas, every year we take a couple of Muslim groups from Indonesia around the cathedral in Melbourne.
Okay.
And on exchange. And always the philosophers, and always one or two of them, always want to see Thomas Aquinas' chapel there. Or got a photograph taken there.
He's very popular in analytic circles.
Yeah.
I mean, he's really marvellous.
The big problem is that, and I think even the Dominicans in our province jettisoned Thomism straight after the council. They just dropped it.
I mean, one of the problems, of course, is...
And that's why we never got any, even as a student, we got very little Thomism formally.
Yeah, well, that's a shame.
I wrote to the vocations director in 1994 saying, cause I'd come through the order through St. Thomas Aquinas.
Yeah.
I'd read a little bit of the Summa Contra Gentiles. My appetite was whetted, so I was thinking about religious life. Wrote to the Dominicans because they kind of fitted what I was in. Will I be able to study St. Thomas Aquinas? Oh yeah, sure. Got nothing. Absolutely zilch. Maybe one course on St. Thomas.
But that's... I understand the critiques against manualism. Having said that, I was raised on manualism and thoroughly enjoyed it. But as a scholar, you need to go to the primary sources, and there's no comparison to going to Thomas and seeing Thomas himself. And that's always the way to go ahead. Because with the manuals, you know, there's always going to be something else. What did Suarez do to change these things?
Yes.
He was not a Dominican. So, you know, but there's those aspects. But just go to the primary sources. See how Thomas deals with the issues. And it's really something. I mean, I'm a big fan.
But the thing is, you can't you don't, as one of our guys says, and we do have some very good guys who are Thomists, but one guy said, you just can't dip into the silver like a telephone book. You know, you don't say, oh, we'll look up something on sin, you know, blah, 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 there we go. You have to understand the entire framework
Sure.
and where that fits in.
That's scholarship.
And that's the
But
whole
it's just,
idea,
but it's just
you know.
be scholars.
Yeah.
Be scholars. But we need to be giving people, above all, witness to scholarship.
Yeah.
What does intellectual life look like? What is the life of the mind, you know, when you're a believer? We need to be bringing people into those sorts of circles. I met some, so again, I'm giving you a very biased response, and always the comeback to any of these things that I'm saying is, but that's just a subsection, that's just a small group, that's just, maybe, but a small group's better than no group. So I'm going to deal with the small group as opposed to nothing. And as I say, people at the University of Notre Dame that I've encountered who've had real conversions because of the presentation of theology. And it's wonderful to see, you know, one young woman who was doing law, kind of Catholic, and she tells a story. You know, she came across, Father James Baxter, Dominican, who, you know, talking about faith and reason, these sorts of things. Got into it, convinced her friend to get into it, who was doing law, now does law and philosophy, and then she's convinced her fiance, I think they're married now, and he's a tattoo artist. He's into it. And he does apostolate with his clients. Because, you know, anyone who spends, like, you know, who's a hairdresser or a beauty therapist or, you know, anyone who spends a lot of time intimately,
With someone in a
you chit
Who can't talk back.
you chit chat about life, the meaning of life, all that kind of stuff, and in the end it comes down to something and he's able to share the faith with them. You know, why are you doing this particular etching on yourself?
Do you think
Yeah.
Is there another question before mine?
just on the subset argument, well, you do have a control of sorts with what too much of mainstream Catholic schooling was like, which is watering down, you know, Jesus was a nice guy, we should do our own thing, and, you know, come as we are liturgy. And you can see, well, that's producing, which is
Fruitless.
no,
Completely
that's
fruitless.
what- so when you've got-
Well, worse in some ways. It's a vaccine. You give just the right amount in its dead form
yeah.
to then, you know, inoculate you against it for the rest of your life.
In fact, I no names. I know an assistant principal of school who's tearing her hair out and what to do.
And that's the difficulty because it's the culture. It's the culture that's against you. It's very hard to make any difference. I do my best to kick the trend, but the trend just flows all over you. Because if I'm not bringing people with me on the journey, you know, it's very difficult to bring them. They just ignore you and just move on, and so you get ignored. Even though you point out, but you know, can't be. Well, what do you want to do that for?
You mentioned just now showing to people what is the life of scholarship, and you've also talked about things that are in fashion and out of fashion. And I think one thing that went out of fashion, which was probably never in fashion, but was just the norm for so long that it became unfashionable, and it's slowly, or even not even slowly, starting to come back, is bringing back to what is the life of a scholar. It's order and discipline. And you see non-Catholic, but very popular influencers, very controversial influencers like Dr. Jordan Peterson, talking about things like clean your room, get your life in shape, you know, just fix the things around you. If you can't even stop living in a mess, how can you make anything more than a mess out of your life? And people are going, yeah, I need to get some order, I need some discipline, I need to, you know...
Yeah, well,
lift some weights.
intellectual discipline. I mean, I know, look, I'd take issue with Thomas on Curiositas.
Do you?
I do.
I think he is actually very insightful, but I have ADHD.
But
And so he was probably thinking of someone like me.
Licensed.
For those, I'm sure you're all aware, but curiositas, as described by Thomas, is the vice of pursuing frivolous knowledge. It's described nowadays as going on the Wikipedia hunt. When you go online, you're like, oh, I'm interested in the answer to this question. You find it, and halfway through reading it, you find 3 or 4 other things in which you had not previously thought about, but go, I'm curious about that. And then you end up 2 in the morning only getting 3 hours of sleep because you've found out, you know, why Easter eggs are made of chocolate or something totally unrelated. And so curiositas is the idea of not ordering your pursuit of knowledge towards a proper end and indulging in an almost gluttonous way your pursuit of knowing things rather than putting it in its proper place. And I thought it was very insightful because that's why I didn't become a doctor. I stayed up all night alone in my college dorm in Perth in med school, reading, funnily enough, books by American convert apologists and theologians, and that's how I ended up studying theology years later. But I spent more time indulging curiositas, reading about apologetics, than medicine.
But if you look at the serendipitous find of Trees of Avalon,
yes,
by Edith Stein, well, no, but she had a very disciplined life at the same time. So.
Well, and she was also in religious life where she didn't have to go off and learn medicine, like I did.
Yeah, but her discovery of that book and reading it in one night led to the conversion.
That's true.
I mean, so there's ultimately, but it is about forming good intellectual habits.
And that's the point I was raising, that it seems to have gone out of fashion for so long that, like Father Manes was saying, Thomism just dropped like a rock.
Well, our Catholic tradition should be teaching in our schools and universities, and it's not easy, again, we have to work within the bureaucratic system, but we need to be showing people what scholarship looks like.
Yeah.
A genuine concern for truth, as opposed to simply jumping through the hoops.
So bring back the cane.
Which is what is now taking place, I think, with the high school certificate. Because I always saw that as a difficulty, a real problem when I was lecturing with the first year students, undoing the bad work that had been done on them during the HSC. And I think that they're trying to do something about that now. You had a...
Yes. You were talking about the difficulty in engaging young people. You talked about that, and most of our chapters have an ageing population and declining population. In fact, many of our parishes do as well. But could you give us any further advice about how we can maybe engage the younger people specifically in this domain as in our...
Be online. Be online. I mean, ultimately, an online community should lead to a real life meetup, and where there's an actual practice. But how are people going to find? What is it? St. Paul? How will people know this is someone to preach?
Having the right language to be online. You know, I've got a granddaughter and she's always online, but I go to write something and I think, this doesn't sound like them. It's different, yes. And then you don't like that at the bottom, you know, love sweet.
They put it in big.
There's a lot of jokes made about that, people using the internet language incorrectly.
Yes, so I'm going there.
But you can be yourself. There's no harm in being yourself online.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I've got 3 sons, and they've always got their mates over, and all of them got a great sense of humour. And often I hear them because I put something on Facebook, and they go, "Oh, classic mum." You know, and for at first I was going like, "Oh, well, what's wrong with classic mum?" But I actually realised more recently it's actually this really strong endearment.
Yeah.
And then I actually said it back to my son. I said, yeah, but if I wasn't classic mum, you wouldn't like it. He goes, that's right, mum. So he actually likes it, and I put a lot of religious stuff on Facebook because I photograph and my experience. I might just put a little snapshot of something, and it ends up. The other day I embarrassed myself by looking at my own homepage. And oh my God, there's got to be.
But there's a lot of lurkers. There's a lot of people who are they're watching from a distance.
Yeah, exactly.
And they go, what is this?
Yeah, and all the
And you're providing something they can't get elsewhere.
Tick the right box. You know, because every now and then I go and think, oh well, who actually did? And I'm like, oh wow. And then I get embarrassed. And go, oh, that person did that.
Because don't forget, in many ways, even though they've got everything, they're very dissatisfied. They're looking.
And they're like, that we use classic mum or classic
Yeah,
grandma.
they're looking. There's something in that. This is different. This is different to
You
what
can
the
give
others
them a
have.
laugh as well. I put on the bottom LOL thinking it was lots of love, but it was lots of laugh.
Laughing out loud.
Yeah, no, there's a number of things about precisely what you know that
Savina, just so you know, Savina, you mentioned that you don't really know how they speak, and so you're afraid to jump in. But unless you start going to the football and watching them play, you won't know the rules.
Yeah.
So the classic response to, oh, I'm afraid to go online because I don't know what they're talking about, is do what the bishop just described. Just sit there and look at what they're doing. Now, I know you might not have the time, that's okay, but if you want to actually integrate there and you want to use that tool more than just putting up a photo of the cat or something, part of it will be almost like study. Almost going on there and just reading what people are talking about and how they talk about it. Because it's only through integrating do you actually get to make sense of it. You don't have to, because the reality is you might feel, well, you know what, I already talk the way I do and I like the way I talk and that's fine. That really is fine. But if what you want is to fit...
You want to communicate with them on their level.
But it's not
But
much
at
to
the
do.
same time, you want to be yourself.
I think that's the important thing. It was quite a phony or a try-hard mind.
Yes.
There's an awful lot of phoniness around.
So you want to
Goes
be
through,
yourself.
They want you to be yourself.
It's not any form of communication though, it's both speaking and listening. And if you want to be able to speak to them, you need to first of all listen to them to see what they're on about. Join any Catholic youth page on Facebook or something like that, and just browse it for about an hour and just read the sorts of things they post, what sort of comments they make. A lot of it won't make sense.
And grow a really thick skin.
But
Really
like,
thick skin.
really read it,
Memes for
and just
confused Marxist, menacing Marxist. That's my favourite, menacing Marxist.
All of a sudden you go, oh, I've seen it used here, and I've seen this other comment, this comic also here, and it starts to make a little bit of sense. And then once you start getting aggressive with a grip of it, you can start engaging a little bit.
Father, I want to ask a
Yeah.
question, please, Father. I have been in the school of evangelization with Bishop Joe many years ago. When
I agree.
was
Yes. Yes.
But I still seem to be having a problem. My question is, how do you evangelize a young person or persons, in my case there are 3, who always, one is 20, the youngest one is 14, the youngest one is 12, there's another one in the middle, 15. How do you evangelize young persons who say religion, but there's one who really, she's in Sydney University, she says religion is private. It's each person's choice. You don't have to come to teach me your spiritual experience. Now we are giving testimonies. Don't come to teach me your spiritual experience, but what we have learned in evangelization is that you can share testimonies that are appropriate, not every testimony, appropriate to the situation. You're not even allowed to speak. And so much so that I see they do that music that you were talking about, the modern young people's music. I don't know the name. So I'm a generation gap there is. And even when I go close to them, of course they watch those things, and I'm praying a lot, the rosary, but there should be some words. And I don't know how to bring it because they think this is our desire. This is the way we know Jesus. They design for themselves. They are very headstrong, and they think we know everything, and you don't have to tell us.
Well, that is typical of a university student.
Yes, this is the thing.
Of every age. I mean, a 20-year-old knows, the one that there's that famous saying of Mark Twain about when he was 20, he thought his dad was an idiot. And then when he was 30, he was amazed how much his dad had learnt over 10 years.
Yes.
I mean, so
Absolutely true.
there's, but I would challenge the presumptions. I would challenge what they have to say. There's religion is private. No, it's not. That's not the definition of religion.
They won't let me.
Show me a private religion. Give me. So challenge the statements.
Yes.
So well, give me evidence.
Yes.
No religion is private. The only ones that are, you wouldn't know about it because it's private. Like in the sense that, you know, so where's your evidence? So you can ask them and say, I think you're making a dogmatic statement.
Yes.
Show me the evidence for your claim.
The question to them, not all into their court.
Yeah, so show me the evidence.
Yeah.
Oh, no, but then they'll move to something else.
Yeah.
And they'll be very disciplined. They'll go, yeah, but because you have always done this, or you,
Yeah.
it's got nothing to do with the claim that they have made.
Yeah.
And then, so if it's calm, you're able to say, well, what you're saying simply doesn't make sense. You're flipping it all over the place now. And then maybe you might get to what the emotional argument, which is what they're really trying to do. Like, but I feel left out, I feel like I'm a loser, I feel like this is weird. Okay, that we can talk about. But the claim is made, you have to say, show me the evidence. Illustrate that for me. What does that mean? A bit like Socrates,
Yeah.
where you run with what they're saying. You go, well, but in fact, even though everyone says this, that's clearly what a religion is not. If you look at, you know, if you look at Hinduism or Buddhism or any of them, you know, hundreds of different religions, they're always social. They're always in the public domain. They're always so what you're saying something else, I think. What is the something else that you're actually saying? Let's explore that. But that's what I would do as a university tutor. You know, I suppose it's about developing that kind of detachment. Let's see what you're saying and run with it.
Some forms of evangelisation that you've learned don't work on a university campus because you're dealing with people. You're dealing with supposedly people who are studying, but they're very undisciplined in their mind. But to talk to them about an experience for them is like, oh, well, that's your experience. It's not my experience. You know? So when you come to that method of challenging them gets them to think for once rather than feel. So we've moved away from a thinking religion to a feeling religion, and we need to bring that kind of back to in the sense of the middle ground, where there has to be a strong intellectual bent, which the Dominican charism is really all about, in essence, and the strong piety together. So, yeah.
That's from social network.
Breaking the ground for this type of shift in thinking has got to start somewhere in the schools too. This feeling kind of religion has just been there. I don't know what it's like now, but it seemed to have been there for a long time. This kind of emotional response rather than having knowledge and objective knowledge rather than just experiential.
There's a lot of things that have to change.
It needs to start in our schools as well.
Sure, there's a lot of things that need to start in our schools.
Is there any way of just making the, say in your position too, in the Archdiocese, of adjusting that input into the schools and the
I spend
Archdiocese?
every waking moment I'm striving to do exactly that. Every fibre of my being.
Yeah.
It's like sprinting in the waist deep in water.
Maybe if we came the teachers.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's the difficult. So Archbishop Fisher, the rest of the bishops and priests, we are trying to do that. Always, in everything that we do, we are striving for that. The difficulties.
Where are the roadblocks?
If I knew, I'd remove them. It's working within the bureaucracy. So, like a point I love that's made about the Mongol army, and that was said to them, you guys, you've got the technological advantage of being able to shoot arrows, on horseback, and then you're able to conquer the world, but you can't run the empire with your horses. You need the Han bureaucrats. And now, the magical arts of bureaucracy, the dark arts of bureaucracy are where it's at.
What solutions do you see to
getting the right people, in these places of influence. That's where the battle is at, and that comes down to just petty politics many times.
And that takes time, obviously.
Sure.
Do you see any light on the horizon?
Well, there's the resurrection.
Certainly I see some, right?
I think culturally, look, I mean, if you look at the young people who do take the faith seriously, they're almost all quite orthodox. So, but it is a question of time and again rising through the bureaucracy. And you know, it's a constant battle. But it is a question of daily committee decisions. Yeah. That section 2.5.6 should be under the table of 2.6.7. That's where the hand-to-hand combat takes place.
The problem with bureaucracy, too, lots of problems, but one of them is that the wrong people get into the wrong positions, and it's very nice, thank you, it's very comfortable, and they want to stay there, and they're the wrong people. Is there any way of kind of shifting the
as I said, Archbishop, Bishops, we are striving with every fibre of our being in this regard, and that's the day-to-day reality.
And the thing too is to get good people alongside you too, who would be able to shift the chairs a little bit. You know what I mean? You know, people you trust and people who know their stuff to build up a coterie of people.
But again, and here's the difficulty too. It's not a question of light versus dark. We're human beings. We're all sinners. So we do wrong things too. And the goodies are sometimes a bit batty, and the baddies have aspects which are a bit good. I mean, it is really complex. It's just as complex as all human beings are. And you know, we're never going to be a utopia in that sense. And I think you look at that's what reading the history of the church and fathers of the church have had to say. Reading it as a bishop, they go, I think I know what you're all about, you know, this and that. I mean, in some ways, I guess it is about faith in God, and thanks be to God, grace, and there's only one Saviour, you know, and it's Jesus Christ. And that realisation, handing ourselves over to God. In many ways, it's looking at that.
At times it seems that our own system works against the faith of our children. I've seen sacramental programs, especially the ones aimed at the Eucharist. There's no mention of the true presence. There's no mention.
It's Lutheran.
It's a party. Apparently, it's a celebration. It's a party. That's about as far as it goes. There's nothing Catholic about it.
Well, many times
a Protestant would be very proud of those books, you know. And then we wonder why our children don't understand, don't believe.
Well,
if we're not teaching our children this, you know.
You need doctrine. But you need doctrine. We need doctrinal formation.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But again, to get there, so I know that, we're really agreeing. But you go to the committee and you say to everyone, this is what we need, and they go, absolutely, Bishop, of course, Bishop. We're here to serve you, Bishop. Then they go off and do whatever they're planning. It's yes, Minister.
Yeah.
Isn't there
all the way through, you know,
a whole bunch of stuff
So this is the wrong people in the wrong job.
It's always been us. Always will be.
Well, and to be fair, when I said to my schools, there's a huge parent problem. You know, parents make these pledges to raise their children in the faith and to prepare them for the Eucharist, and everybody knows that 80% of them it's just a complete sham. You know, I hereby invite you to purge yourself before God of this congregation.
I know. So again, I don't encourage that, but the culture, it happens anyway because this is what we do.
But sometimes the parents don't know.
So if we came the parents and the teachers and also the children, we may make some progress. But it is time for tea.
Before I hand these to you, I just wanted to say that while you were talking, you reminded me of years ago when we dropped by Warrain College and ran into you at the door, and you told us about how much you enjoyed Taylor Swift.
Ah, yes.
And then you introduced me to some fun Twitter pages such as Augustine of Hip Hop.
Ah, yes.
The hip hop interpretation of St. Augustine of hip hop. And also, is anyone familiar with the philosopher Søren Kierkegaard?
Yes.
Oh, yes, that's right.
I've forgotten. There's a page interpreting his philosophy in the voice of Kim Kardashian.
Good times.
It's called Kim Kierkegaardashian.
Kim
If you decide to take His Lordship's advice and get onto Twitter, check out those pages. You can also find, the various archdioceses of Sydney. Boring, give it a click and move on. Thank you very much for coming to address us.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you. And please join us for tea.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
I used to have to talk about the catechism.